A Met Office red alert for the first time ever. A heat emergency. In real-world terms, a risk to health services, risk to infrastructure, risk to life.
People can get quite unwell from dehydration quite quickly, especially if they're elderly or already unwell with something else. If they're a cancer patient or something like that, a little bit of dehydration can make them very, very unwell.
And what's your advice to people watching this? Because it's not just the typically vulnerable that need to watch out now, is it?
Yeah, it is stay hydrated, drink lots and lots of water, double the water than you would normally drink. Try and be somewhere cool, wear cool clothing, don't sit in the sun for long periods, don't lay out in the park all day on Monday and Tuesday, even if it might seem like a nice idea at the time. Alcohol dehydrates you more, so if you're drinking alcohol, make sure you're drinking water as well.
Amelia will be pedalling her 75 kilos of paramedic bike through the steamy streets of London's Soho on Monday, late into the evening, with peak temperatures that could exceed 40 degrees. Against a backdrop of our NHS in crisis, resources so stretched, some areas of the country already report 999 waits of several hours, even for stroke or heart attack victims.
The reason that the ambulance services are overwhelmed and A&Es are overwhelmed isn't because of the heat wave, it isn't even because of the COVID pandemic. Those are factors, obviously. We went into the pandemic with more than a decade of underinvestment, and we're in this bizarre situation where the NHS is struggling to cope with hot weather.
Government guidance essentially be prepared and be careful, because analysts predict a worst case scenario of over 1,000 additional deaths. And care homes, of course, are on the front line. But with COVID on the rise again, staff must still wear masks, even with the mercury soaring.
For us, we think, oh, we'll have another shower or whatever it is. With an elderly person, that may not be something that they can do. For people with dementia, we've got to make sure that there is plenty of space for them to wander around, that they're wearing loose-fitting clothes, making sure they're drinking plenty, and for our staff as well, because I think that's the other bit that's really worrying. We don't want them exhausted. We don't want them to be collapsing because the masks are too restricting or whatever, but we've got to comply with the rules.
It's the last week of term for state schools, with no directives to close early, but advice to avoid vigorous activity. And transport's likely to see delays, with speed restrictions on the railways, for fear of buckled tracks in the extreme heat. Wednesday and the welcome prospect of rain, with temperatures returning to normal. But will we be ready the next time weather records are smashed?
Well, our weather presenter Liam Dutton joins us now to take us through the warnings and explain how the extreme heat will develop day to day. Liam.
Thanks, Jackie. Well, as we know already, it's going to be dangerously hot later this weekend and into the early part of next week. Let's break the warnings down day by day. We'll start off with Sunday, and that's when an amber warning is in force for a good part of England and parts of Wales. Temperatures by that point will be into the low 30s. But as we know, it's Monday and Tuesday that we'll see the peak of the heat, and that's when temperatures are likely to rise into the mid to high 30s, locally to around 40. And by that point, the amber warning covers much of England, Wales, southern Scotland, and then there's that highest tier red level warning, that rare red warning that we have, and that stretches from London through the home counties, the Midlands towards northern parts of England. A dangerous situation, and there will be significant impacts to both people and infrastructure, really to be taken seriously.
And how likely are we to see records being broken?
Well, I think we will see a number of records broken, an 80% chance of the all-time UK maximum temperature record being broken. That stands at 38.7 Celsius. It was only set 3 years ago in Cambridge in the middle of July. There's a 50% chance that we could get to 40 degrees Celsius. Now, 40 degrees is a temperature that we normally associate with being on holiday in the south of France or in Spain. So, it's remarkable heat to get this far north in Western Europe. So it really is a concern, and it's the nighttime temperatures too. Temperatures at night are not going to drop much below 20 degrees. It'll make it very difficult for sleeping, particularly for the elderly, the young, the vulnerable. So, it's going to be a really difficult situation. But thankfully, from Wednesday onwards, it will start to cool down, but then in the process, there could be showers and thunderstorms. So lots to watch over the next couple of days.
Liam, thanks very much. Well, this afternoon, 4 of the 5 candidates for the Conservative Party leadership committed to maintaining the government's goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. The only one not to have done so yet is Kemi Badenoch. The move follows a warning from International Environment Minister Jack Goldsmith, who said that the leadership contenders needed to be more serious about climate promises, or the party will face dire electoral consequences. Now, his warning came as temperatures continue to soar across Europe, with Portugal reaching a record for July, hitting 47 degrees. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, reports.
Extremadura in western Spain. There, like here, the heat and drought have yet to peak and the wildfires burn on. They expect new record temperatures in the coming days. Over the border, west into central Portugal, 300 people evacuated from a string of villages as the flames advance. North into France, the southwestern Gironde, more evacuations and wildfires. East to Croatia. So you see, there ain't no such thing as a British heatwave. It's European, it's China, and it's the US as well. Scientists no longer hedging. This is all made worse by our pollution, carbon dioxide and methane emissions. A new report says Western Europe is subject to more frequent and intense heating than almost any other area on the globe. So a clear warning tonight from at least one Green Tory grandee. Should any new Prime Minister attempt to water down our commitments to net zero, this is what will happen.
A Prime Minister who enters the next election in, 18 months' time on an anti-net zero platform is not going to be a Prime Minister after that election. I think that it would be unforgivable, but it would also be electorally suicidal for the UK government, for the Conservative Party, to walk away from a really proud legacy internationally, a really proud position that we're in at the moment.
So what of the candidates? Despite some scepticism about net zero and ways of getting there, in the campaign tonight, 4 of the 5 remaining candidates have signed a pledge committing themselves to the 2050 goal.
I don't think it's realistic that any leader is actually going to be able to persuade Parliament to delegislate. I mean, no UK Parliament is going to delegislate our commitments around net zero. The market, in any case, is miles ahead of the politics. Renewables are cheaper than the alternatives almost everywhere. More money goes into renewables than fossil fuels every year for the last 5 or 6 years. 90% of the world economy is covered by net zero commitments. We're not going backwards on net zero, no matter what candidates say. In my view, I just don't see that as the main risk. But just imagine that a candidate were to approach the next general election with a commitment to scrap net zero. There'll be a small minority of people who would celebrate that. But it's inconceivable, I think, that the British voter, the British electorate, would want to go anywhere near a political party that abandons its leadership.
Globally, Zach Goldsmith believes the diplomatic momentum gained through last autumn's COP climate summit could be lost if the new Prime Minister doesn't understand or decides to ignore science. Not just climate, but the interlinked issue, biodiversity, species loss and extinctions.
The leaders from other countries are asking for reassurance. They want to know that we're not going to walk away. I can't give them that reassurance because we haven't had that reassurance from the candidates. I mean, frankly, I'm not expecting, I would love to be able to say something different. I'm not expecting the UK leadership on the environment to mushroom in the coming weeks and months and run up to the next election. My main hope is that we don't go backwards. So in a sense, it's a kind of damage limitation exercise.
For example, he said, carry on destroying the Congo rainforest as we are, and will alter rainfall across much of Africa, causing an immigration crisis into Europe, the like of which we've never seen. He says the British public gets that. He's just not sure all the current would-be Prime Ministers do.